Hi, this is James from Spaceflight Bricks. In today's video, we're going to take a look at some of the detail on my LEGO Space Shuttle Orbiter model. Let's start with the side hatch, since that's where this project started for me. I wanted to produce the smallest hatch possible that had some of this black detail around the edge and had the approximate shape of the real shuttle hatch, which of course is not perfectly circular. It's got this flat area on the bottom. It took a little while to design the mechanism that would allow the hatch to open just like the real thing. But once I'd figured that out, then the size of the hatch kind of dictated the scale of the rest of the model, which is about 1:37. That's slightly larger than what many consider to be conventional minifig scale, although it does work really well for all of the accompanying service vehicles that we'll see in a different video. Also, if the model had been much smaller, it would have been really tough to work in some of the details in the crew cabin. Here you can see I used a technique with an old style hinge. This was necessary to transition from studs on top, here, to studs on bottom, so that I could get these little cheese slopes in upside down. I've actually used this technique quite extensively throughout the model. Next, we'll take a look at the forward RCS module. I thought it was important to capture the elliptical shape of these exhaust ports. For this, I've used some treadless tires, and they're just squished in place and held there by a clip. I've used a similar technique here, although these ones are held in tension around two studs. The whole module is removable, so a minifig ground crew could take it away and do maintenance. And you can see the underside is hollow. That is so that the landing gear has space to retract. Something else that was on the top of my priority list when building the model was to brick build the cabin windows. I didn't want to have to use stickers to produce the authentic look of the shuttle. I also wanted to be able to have panes of glass in there. Yeah. One drawback to this technique is that because of this angle here, it does result in a strange mishmash of parts meeting in this area. This is definitely somewhere that I would like to improve. Of course, you can't build a shuttle model without including the star tracker ports. For now, these are just static, but in a future version, I would love to have these operable so they can be opened and closed. Okay, now let's check out the crew cabin, which was designed for playability. We have pretty good access to both decks, but let's check out the mid-deck first. The astronauts have seats that are easily removable, with a nice headrest on there. There's a hatch for the airlock, which can be open and closed. We have the side hatch on the far side there. Here we have the galley. Right here we have some storage lockers. On this side, I think this was for science experiments. And over here too. Something not present in this model is sleeping quarters for the astronauts. There will be some bunk beds here. I may add those in a future model on this wall. Next, let's take a look at the flight deck. For better access, we can remove the roof. Sit her in there. So once again, we have some removable seats. The pilot and commander have a nice set of flight controls, complete with a heads-up display. There wasn't quite room to add joysticks in here. And we have a full complement of computers and other equipment, including control for the Canadarm and a translational controller for the shuttle itself. Next, we'll check out the payload bay. You can put any payload in here you want, but currently it has the payload for STS-118, which included Space Hab and this service tunnel. It also has the docking adapter for when flying to the space station. On this side we have the Canadarm, which is just light enough to be poseable. And on this side we have the OBSS, and there's an attachment point there. One part of this that was designed and not implemented was some push rods that would go down into these slots. Those would have allowed me to mechanically actuate the doors and have them remotely operable. When I was assembling for a show, I kind of ran out of time, so I had to omit that feature. So I hope to include that in future versions. One drawback of that design is that these walls are almost 2 studs wide. And because of that, we can't put exact scale payloads in the payload bay. They have to be slightly undersized. Here we have the Ku-band antenna, which is deployed after the payload bay doors are opened during flight. So these currently are just poseable, but the intention is to have these motorized. There should be enough space in here to have some linear actuators that can cause these to move up and down. That's a future project. These guys here are simply there to replicate the look of the wing structure. They do kind of cause a bit of a problem. The design prevents this from moving up unless we manipulate these out of the way, and then we can lift the flaperon up a lot higher. So this is a design that will change at some point in the future. Let's take a look at the wing leading edge here. Once again, the old style hinge plates are hidden within this to allow me to put these curved slopes back to back. So we've got a curved underside and a curved topside. This area, that's kind of kludgy. This was a last minute addition to fill in this space. I don't really like how that turned out, so this part's going to get redesigned at some point. For now, I'll just pull it off to show you how that attaches. Should pop it right off. There we go. So we've got one of those 1x1 plates with the bar attached, and that slots into a clip right here and another clip right here. So I could actually just redesign this segment and then stick that back in. Okay, let's move on to this rear section. Okay, so now we're looking at the detail on this rear portion of the shuttle. Here we have some connections for ground umbilicals. Here we have a vent port. Ideally I would have had these all the way along, but as you can see I've used a different technique here. This is a plate on its side rather than brick built. So I wasn't able to put these ports in this section. Something else interesting here. I've been forced to use this technique again, where we go from studs on top to studs on the bottom, and that's because LEGO does not make these 1x4 slopes in an upside down version. So I had to flip these upside down somehow. These are regular 1x4 slopes to get this transition from black to white here. And another feature I put in here is this access panel. And this should just pop off. There we go. Just held on by one stud. There we go. And quite often you would have seen shuttles on the ground with this yellow area visible. Let me just get that back on there. I'll move around to the Space Shuttle main engines. Currently they are poseable. I'll pull out this bottom one. So that just slots into this ball joint right here. And I'm using these bionicle parts, which have a rubber component to them, which provides a lot of friction, which is great for allowing this, whatever's attached to there, to be posed and to stay in position. The scale of the model permitted me to use these archway pieces. This is the normal arch, and this is the bottom part of the arch. And there's another one on that side. To produce this, I guess that's a 6 stud diameter opening. And then this portion of the engine is a 6 stud, the dish. And it just worked perfect. It was exactly the right size. It worked perfectly for this application. I mean, I couldn't have hoped for it to work out better. It's exactly the right size. Before we talk about the ohms pods, I just wanted to mention that these were designed this way not to be posed, but with the future possibility of being articulated mechanically or being motorized. And within this structure, I hope to have a motor system, possibly it'll be a Mindstorms controller, that can run these engines through a pre-flight, the pre-flight test sequence. I think that would be pretty neat to see when this thing is sitting vertical on the launch pad. Anyway, let's move on. Something rivet counters may notice is that these ohms pods are a bit oversized. And in fact, they're maybe one stud too wide and half a stud too tall. So one of my next challenges is to make these a bit smaller. That's going to be really difficult, I think, because of this section right here. It's already about as small as I can get it while still retaining the 4 RCS nozzles on the side, 3 on the bottom, or that's 3 on the bottom, 3 on the bottom, and 3 on the top. Everything here is pretty well in correct proportions. This engine bell might be slightly oversized, but it's for the most part the correct size, so I don't know how I'm going to be able to shrink this down. This, by the way, is the only part of the entire model that I partially designed in stud.io. And that was because I didn't have a lot of these parts in any color, so it was very handy to have a computer program that would allow you to design something like that. At some point, I would like to put fuel tanks and things underneath here. That's a project for far in the future. You'll notice here I was able to use a lot of cheese slopes, and this permits adding a color variation which we can tailor to the specific orbiter that we're displaying. At different stages during their lives, the orbiters had different tile patterns here on the ohms pods. Okay, next we'll look at the tail. Before I take it off, I'll just show you this feature, which is that it can rotate for steering purposes, but it's also a split rudder. It's really a two-handed operation, but there we go. So we can use the split rudder as an air brake. Does open a bit farther than that. So let's pull that tail off and have a closer look. It's a later version, which has the parachute pod here. I'll take this panel off so we can look at the internal structure. There's an axle running the length of this. Eventually I would like to motorize the rudder, and if I do that, my plan so far is to run a second axle through here, which can drive an upper and lower section. Another change I hope to make is to narrow the front. Right now it's 2 studs wide. I think maybe it could do with being just 1 stud wide. So I'll try to make it taper more from the center to the front. Okay, so here we see the underside of the shuttle. We still have the landing gear deployed, so I'll show you how that folds in. Now, I actually designed these so that the support axle right here can be driven to actuate the landing gear. So at some point, yep, this will also be actuated with a motor. That's the goal anyway. I'm really not sure what to do about these doors. Gear doors. I had a system using this elastic here that would pull the gear door closed when the landing gear was retracted. But even though this kind of worked, it didn't translate well to the actual model. I designed this part long before I actually built all of the enclosure here, so I kind of ran out of space basically. So this approach is not going to work. I got to figure out something new and figure out how to jam it into this tiny space. So that's another future project. Now we get to, well, before we look at this gear, which basically operates in the same way, I want to show you these. And here's another thing rivet counters will have noticed. These external tank umbilical connections are in the wrong location. I was in a huge rush to get this underside complete for a show about 2 years ago. So I quickly got it all assembled. But if you look at the location of these, they are underneath the payload bay. And where they should be is right about here, feeding into the area here where the Space Shuttle main engines are. So this is definitely something I have to redesign, move these over to here, because the next place I display this, I hope to have the bottom of the shuttle showing. So not only am I going to move these over, I'm also going to change this so we flip this over and have tiles showing in this area. Give it a nice smooth look. Here, once again, we've got the gear that can retract. The door is just manually actuated right now, but yeah, in future I hope to do something about that. We'll lift this off, and you can have a look inside at the structure. Yeah, even when you can't see what's there, I like symmetry, so I try to use all the same color parts from one side to the other. You can see that this is the wire that feeds into around here to the crew cabin for the lighting. Here you can see I've used these old style hinges again to get that stud facing up to stud facing down transition. I use them underneath here as well. And inside the wing, this is one panel. This is another panel that'll lift off. It's quite a complicated structure to design. What you can't quite see here is there's Technic beams that form a structure underneath here, and that kind of takes all the weight from the landing gear in order to support the body of the spacecraft. So that's an overview of my Space Shuttle Orbiter model. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, like and subscribe. I hope to upload more videos in the coming months. Have a great day.